Welcome to HardScript.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. The last time I tried to kiss her, she pulled away like I was poison. Not with a fight, not even with disgust, just absence, as if I wasn't there at all. That was the moment I stopped reaching. But the moment that truly changed everything came later, when I walked into the living room and saw her on her knees, sobbing, begging me for a hug I no longer had in me to give. But to understand that moment, you have to rewind to the quiet death before the collapse. Her name was Vanessa. We'd been married 6 years, built a life full of checkboxes, house, careers, couple photos on vacation. From the outside, we were solid. But behind closed doors, I was starving. Not for drama, not for chaos, for connection. Simple, human connection. A kiss in the kitchen, a touch on the shoulder, fingers brushing mine as she passed. Every time I leaned in, she leaned back. Every time I opened, she closed. I used to think she was just stressed, that it was work, hormones, her mood. But then I started noticing a pattern. She always had time for her phone, for her gym classes, for happy hours with coworkers. Just not for me. I'd come home, sit beside her on the couch, put my hand on her leg, and she'd shift it off like it was too warm. No words, no explanation. Just the message, not now, not you. One night, I tried to talk, asked her if everything was okay. She said I was overthinking it, that I was too emotional, that men weren't supposed to need all that touchy stuff. That word stuck, need, as if needing affection made me weak. I didn't argue, just sat there in the silence she left hanging. But that's when the shift began. I stopped talking, stopped trying, not out of anger, but calculation. She'd made it clear I was invisible unless I performed. So I did what men like me eventually do. I disappeared, silently. I watched, waited, prepared, not to explode, but to exit. Because when a man reaches for love and finds only cold shoulders, eventually, he stops reaching. And when he stops, she'll notice. But by then, he'll already be gone. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't even a moment between us. It was one sentence from someone else that cracked the foundation. Her name was Haley, one of Vanessa's closest friends. The kind that's always around, smiling too wide, always knowing too much. She came over one Saturday afternoon while Vanessa was out running errands. We made awkward small talk in the kitchen. I poured her some coffee. Then she looked at me, tilted her head, and said something that sliced deeper than any accusation. "You're a good guy, you know. Too good for some people to see what they have." She said it gently, almost casually, but her eyes didn't blink. And that's when I knew. Something was off. Something had been off for a long time. Haley left soon after. I stood by the window, coffee going cold in my hand, thinking back over the last 6 months. The way Vanessa stopped looking at me during dinner. The sudden change in her routines. Late nights at work, new clothes, passwords on her phone. It wasn't proof. Not yet. But it was enough to make me start watching more closely. That night, I didn't try to touch her. I didn't ask questions. I just observed. And that's when the next shift happened. She started acting nicer. Not warm, but rehearsed. More eye contact. Forced smiles. A kiss on the cheek before bed that felt about as sincere as a political handshake. I didn't respond, because I knew what was coming. When a woman senses a man has stopped chasing, she doesn't relax, she panics. And her panic makes her sloppy. I found her second phone 2 weeks later, hidden in the side pocket of her gym bag, which she'd left out for the first time in years. Burner phone. One contact saved as M. That's when the air changed. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. Because this wasn't rage. This was strategy. I didn't confront her. I didn't even touch the phone. I just memorized everything. And that night, I lay next to her, staring at the ceiling, while she slept like someone with nothing to lose. I knew then, this wasn't about love anymore. This was about reclaiming myself. No war. No explosion. Just the quiet, careful construction of an exit she wouldn't see coming. The next morning, she left early. Said she had a team meeting and errands. I nodded, kissed her forehead like nothing had changed, and closed the door behind her. Then I turned around and got to work. Not out of revenge. Out of precision. I opened her laptop, the one she rarely used anymore, but hadn't password protected in months. There, in the browser history, were synced texts from the burner. I don't think she realized the accounts were still linked. I saw messages from M. Casual at first, then intimate, then shameless. I wish I could fall asleep next to you again. When he touches me, I feel nothing. You're the only thing that feels real. I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity. I screenshotted everything, uploaded them to a private drive, then deleted my trail. Step 1 wasn't confrontation. Step 1 was information. That week, I checked our joint accounts, tracked spending patterns, transferred a percentage of our shared savings to my personal account, quiet, legal, traceable. I canceled the secondary credit card in her name. She noticed that one, asked casually, "Hey, did something happen with the visa?" It declined today. I told her I'd look into it, and she just nodded, still thinking I was blind, still thinking I was weak. She had no idea I'd already changed the locks on the vacation cabin, that I'd already retained a lawyer, that the lease on the small apartment downtown was signed in my name only. I started sleeping deeper, not because I trusted her, because I no longer needed to. I stopped offering touches, glances, anything warm. And that's when something changed in her. She began hovering, asking if I was okay, offering to cook, coming home early. It was too late. Affection offered only when it's threatened isn't love. It's control. She'd spent 2 years pulling away every time I reached for her. Now that I wasn't reaching, she noticed, and she hated it. But I wasn't doing this for her attention. I was doing it for my freedom. The best revenge isn't fire. It's absence, not slamming doors, just never walking through them again. The morning I left, the silence was louder than any scream she'd ever thrown at me. I didn't take much, just what was mine. A single suitcase, my documents, my laptop, a few shirts and my watch. She was at yoga. At least, that's what her calendar said. Maybe she was with him. I didn't care anymore. I walked out the front door like I was just going to get groceries, except this time, I never planned to come back. The apartment downtown was already stocked. Bedmate. Utilities set up. My name on every paper. No fingerprints left behind. I turned off my phone and left it in the nightstand of the old house, like a snake shedding its skin. Within 2 hours, she started calling. First my phone, then my work email, then mutual friends. They messaged me, confused, asking, "Are you okay?" Vanessa's worried. I ignored them all. Because when someone pushes you away over and over, the real punishment isn't leaving loudly. It's leaving well. At 7 p.m. that night, my work phone, the one she didn't know about, buzzed with an email from her. Subject, "Please talk to me." I didn't open it. I just watched. The panic wasn't about love. It was about control. Her routine had been interrupted. The emotional leash she thought she held had gone slack. And what happens to someone who builds their confidence on power when the person they once ignored stops responding? They crumble. She started texting friends photos of us from years ago, telling people I just left, that I was going through something. She forgot to mention the second phone I found, the messages I saved. The slow, methodical unraveling she started with every cold shoulder she gave me when I reached for her in bed, and she turned away like I was nothing. Now, I returned the favor. I became nothing. To her. At least from her view. But I wasn't gone. I was just watching. And planning my final step. Not to punish. To close. No letters. No confrontation. No final talk on the couch. Just a signature. And a silence she'd never be able to fill. I never said his name out loud. Not once. But I knew it from the start. The man she whispered to in the hallway late at night, pretending to be checking work messages. The same man who sent her a playlist titled, "For When He's Not Home." Michael. He worked in her office. Older than me. More money. More charm. Or at least the kind that runs shallow but shines on the surface. I didn't care about him. But I studied him. Silently. One of my closest friends worked in corporate compliance. All I needed was a name and a few key behaviors, and the rest unfolded. Michael had a pattern. Manipulation under the radar, subtle favoritism, a history of quiet HR warnings that never made it to termination but lingered just enough to stain. And now, there was proof. A paper trail. Screenshots of messages between him and another assistant 6 months ago. Promises. Innuendos. A non-disclosure agreement quietly pushed under the table. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was balance. So I printed it all, mailed it anonymously to HR, from a coffee shop in a different city. 2 weeks later, he was suspended pending investigation. 3 weeks after that, she stopped posting him in her Instagram stories. She didn't know I had pulled the thread. She just thought the tower fell on its own. That's the thing about shadows. They don't scream. They just dim the light until everything collapses. Vanessa had built her secret life on a man who used silence the way she used touch, selectively. Now she was left without both. She called me again the night after his suspension. I watched the call ring through on my second phone. Let it buzz until it stopped. No voicemail. No text. Just digital emptiness. Exactly like the last year of our marriage. The more I stayed silent, the more noise she created. She started appearing at my office parking lot, standing near my building. Once, she left a note on my windshield that read, "Can we talk? Just for a minute." I didn't respond, because I wasn't waiting for closure. I was already past it. In chess, you don't warn the queen you're coming. You just take the piece and move on. She had made her choices. Now she had to sit in them, alone. I wasn't angry. I was free. 2 weeks passed. Long enough for the whispers to start turning into stares. Her perfect social circle, coworkers, brunch friends, curated followers, began noticing cracks. She looked tired, nervous. Her posts became less frequent, captions shorter. That polished image of stability? Fading. Then came the dinner. It was a mutual friend's birthday. Rachel, one of those women who always noticed too much but said too little. Vanessa went alone. I had RSVP'd no before I disappeared. But someone told me what happened. Apparently, midway through dinner, Rachel raised her glass, then paused, looked right at Vanessa, and said, "Funny thing about lies, they always echo back." Everyone froze. No one defended her. Not one voice broke the tension. Even the waiter didn't refill her wine. Vanessa laughed it off, said Rachel must be tired. But her hand shook as she reached for the glass. And that was it. The silence around her thickened. She began losing invites. Group chats grew quieter. Her DMs turned dry. It wasn't scandal. It was absence. The same absence I had given her. Now the world gave it back. That's what people never understand. Real exposure doesn't always look like headlines. Sometimes it looks like nobody calling you back. I watched it unfold through the few people still talking to both of us. They didn't know I was listening. I never commented, never asked. But I heard everything. She's not the same. Jumpy. Something happened. But she won't say what. I think she's scared he might never come back. And that's when I knew. She still hadn't told anyone the truth. Because she couldn't. Because it would mean admitting she'd lost control. Not just of me. Of everything. That's the cruel beauty of a silent exit. It makes the lie collapse under its own weight. I didn't have to explain myself. She did. And the more she tried to explain, the more desperate she looked. People didn't need evidence. They just needed to watch the way she panicked at a name. Flinched when someone mentioned downtown apartments. Fell quiet at the word Michael. She wasn't outed. She unraveled. And I was already miles ahead. No gloating. No messages. No warning. Just distance. And the quiet satisfaction of being the man who no longer needed to be in the room to be remembered. The thing about isolation is, it doesn't hit like thunder. It seeps in. Quiet. Patient. Like a room slowly losing oxygen. Vanessa tried to fix the image. Started posting photos of old vacations, pretending nothing had changed. But the likes were down. Comments faded. She even tried a new haircut, a new voice in her captions. None of it worked. Because once the silence starts, it feeds on itself. I had become invisible. Not just to her, but to the story she tried to keep alive. And she hated it. Because the one thing Vanessa couldn't control was a man who stopped reacting. And I had stopped reacting. Completely. She showed up at my gym one morning. I saw her through the window. She didn't come in. Just stood outside, staring. I finished my set, grabbed my bag, walked past her without breaking pace. She didn't say a word. Neither did I. That silence. That was the moment she truly understood. I was gone. Not moved out. Not angry. Gone. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Gone in a way that didn't need revenge, closure, or an apology. Gone in a way she couldn't manipulate. She texted me later that day. The message was long. Begging, emotional. "Let's talk. We can fix this. You don't have to disappear." I left it on read. Because disappearing wasn't the goal. The goal was clarity. And the moment she stood alone, watching the version of me that no longer needed her. That was the clearest message I could ever send. Vanessa tried to reconnect with her family, people she hadn't called in months. They responded politely, but the tone had shifted. No one asked about us. No one offered sympathy. They had noticed too. Real isolation isn't about being alone. It's about being surrounded by people who no longer care to ask what happened. She wasn't rejected. She was forgotten. I stayed in town. I went to the same grocery store, the same bank, the same places, but I existed just outside her reach. Like a life she once had, now walking freely without her. And that's when it sank in. Not only had she lost me, she'd never even seen me leave. Because I didn't slam the door. I just stopped opening it. She finally broke the rules. Showed up at my apartment. I was walking in from work, same route, same time, and there she was, sitting on the steps like some ghost frozen in place. Hair tied up, makeup faint, but it wasn't about appearance. It was the way she looked at me, like she didn't recognize the man standing in front of her. I didn't say a word. I walked past her, unlocked the door. She stood up fast. "Just 5 minutes," she said. Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. I paused. Not because I felt anything, but because I wanted her to know she was no longer entitled to even a minute. Still, I stepped aside. Let her in. It was strategic. Measured. I wasn't giving her space. I was giving her the last silence she'd ever get from me. She stood in the center of my living room like it was the first time she'd been in a stranger's house. I scanning the walls. New art. New books. Her presence wasn't just unwanted. It didn't fit anymore. Then she started talking. Fast. Disorganized. Emotional. She said she made mistakes, but nothing unforgivable. That I had disappeared without warning. That she never stopped loving me. I didn't respond. She said Michael was a mistake. Just a moment. That she didn't even know why she did it. Still, I said nothing. She stepped closer, her hands trembling. Asked if we could start over. I looked at her, not through anger, but through finality. And then, after minutes of her spinning circles around her guilt, I finally said 6 words. "You don't get to rewrite this." That was it. No monologue. No dramatics. She stared at me like I had gutted the air out of her lungs. Because she was waiting for me to fight for her. To shout, cry, demand. But I wasn't there for her. I was there to confirm what she already feared, that I had already left. That the version of me who once begged for her attention was buried beneath the man standing silent before her now. She walked out without another word. I locked the door behind her, then changed the code. That was the last time I saw her in person. No screaming, no chaos, just a quiet, irreversible shift. She came looking for a crack in my resolve, but found a wall she could no longer climb. The unraveling didn't come with fireworks. No one dragged her name through the mud. There were no loud scandals, no messy confrontations. It was quieter than that, more brutal because of it. People stopped inviting her places, not out of spite, just indifference. Conversations shifted when she entered the room. Smiles faded quicker. Small talk grew colder. No one brought up my name, not because it was taboo, but because it no longer mattered. Vanessa wasn't scandalous. She was just replaced. Her friend group thinned. A few tried to stick around, but they didn't know what to say. She'd go out of her way to bring me up, like she was testing the waters. No one bit. They nodded politely and moved on. That's the thing about respect. It doesn't leave loudly. It just fades until you're talking and no one's listening. She switched jobs. I heard from someone at her old firm that the breakup had changed her energy. She wasn't sharp anymore. Started missing deadlines. She called in sick more often. Management let her go quietly. Meanwhile, I wasn't hiding. I was just elsewhere. New circles. New habits. My name floated through rooms she could no longer access. She saw photos, mutual friends at events, dinners, places we used to go. Only now, I was with people she didn't know. Smiling, but not performative. Calm. Present. Distant. She messaged one of our old mutuals, an old college friend named Brooke. Asked if I ever talked about her. Brooke replied, "Not anymore." That message? It shattered her more than any insult ever could. Because I hadn't smeared her. I had erased her. Completely. And when she couldn't find a version of herself reflected in anyone else's life, that's when the panic set in. I wasn't angry. I was unreachable. And when someone disappears without taking revenge or demanding closure, It leaves the other person stuck in a loop with no resolution. That's what she lived now. A loop of maybe, what if, and too late. I built a better life, quiet, structured, elevated. Not to spite her, but to remind myself who I was before I let someone rewrite me into someone smaller. She had burned the bridge, but I was the one who paved the road away from it. She reached out one final time, not with a long message, not with flowers or apologies, just a voice memo. 64 seconds of words that felt like they were scraping the bottom of a dry well. She said she didn't want to fix things, that she knew she couldn't, said she wasn't expecting forgiveness. She just wanted me to know she still thought about me every day, that it didn't feel right, waking up in a world where I no longer existed in her life. I didn't respond, not out of pettiness, out of principle. That voice memo wasn't for me. It was for her guilt, a final attempt to unburden herself before disappearing fully from my story. But I had no interest in making her feel lighter. She had built that weight with her own hands. A month passed, then two. I saw her once, by accident. Grocery store. She didn't notice me. Hair tied in a messy bun. No makeup. A distant, hollow expression on her face like she was walking through fog. And I realized something in that moment. She was no longer the woman I remembered because I had stopped remembering her. She wasn't the villain anymore. Just a person who underestimated the silence of someone done explaining themselves. And me? I wasn't rebuilding. I was redefined. I'd started painting again. A hobby I'd abandoned when we moved in together because she said it made the apartment smell weird. I got a dog. Small, loyal, quiet, the opposite of chaos. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years. Not to show I'd moved on, but because I finally had space in my life for peace. I didn't post cryptic quotes. Didn't flirt for validation. Didn't play the revenge game. I just left. Strategically. Fully. Quietly. And that silence? It echoed louder than anything I could have said. Because there's no revenge more complete than letting someone live in the absence of your energy. She thought my silence was temporary. She thought I'd eventually come back, needing closure, needing her to admit fault. But closure isn't a conversation. It's a decision. And mine was made the moment I chose not to explain myself. The final thought I leave you with, the one she'll probably hear in her head forever, though I never said it out loud. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. Drop it in the comments. Hit subscribe. This is where we talk about what doesn't get forgiven.